Dixie here to continue the everything you need to know to hack the AT series. Today I want to talk about the Appalachian Trail culture, community, and hacker etiquette. The Appalachian Trail culture is very unique. To begin with, it's very supportive. When I started my thru hike of the AT, I thought that I wanted to be alone and that I wanted to think, and in hindsight I'm so glad that it didn't actually work out like that at the beginning. I did spend more time alone towards the end, and it was a good thing. But at the beginning, there are so many people around because thousands of people attempt to thru hike the Appalachian Trail each year, most of them going northbound, but there still is a significant amount going southbound. But if you want to be around people and you don't want to be alone, all you've got to do is camp at night near one of the shelters. That kind of seems to be the hub where everybody gathers up, whether they stay in the shelter or whether they camp nearby, but there's typically a privy and also a water source. If you're the type of person that wants a little bit more quiet time, then just choose not to camp at a shelter, and you can camp alone if you prefer to. But having other hikers around me who were so supportive and encouraging, and to sit around a campfire at night and talk about how challenging the day was, we were going through the same struggles. It's really bonding to have those experiences with people who are doing something so crazy with you, like thru hiking the Appalachian Trail. And writing in the logbooks at the shelters is kind of like hiker social media. You can leave notes to one another, make funny jokes. I mean, people talk about their bowel movements, all sorts of stuff in those shelter logbooks, but that's another cool part of the culture and something that was fun to share with other hikers. But one of my favorite things is that everyone was willing to help each other out. If a fellow hiker needed something, I never once heard somebody say, "Oh, wait a second, where do you stand in politics? Like, who did you vote for in the last election?" Because those things just don't matter when you're out there literally trying to meet those basic needs of food, water, and shelter. So it was the first time in my life that people were so united coming from different backgrounds versus seeing families break apart because they're arguing about ridiculous stuff on social media. Many hikers end up forming lifetime friendships because they end up forming what is known as a tramily. A tramily in hiker terms is just a trail family. It's people that you end up bonding with, you click with for whatever reason, and y'all kind of travel down the trail together, whether that's hiking together during the day or just making plans to camp together, to go into town together. It's normal sometimes for people to have multiple tramilies while they're on trail, because maybe you start off with one group and it kind of eventually busts up and you form up with another group. But having a tramily was one of my favorite things about being on the AT. It's just like you're a little group of people that you can talk to about anything and you share all sorts of cool experiences with. Another aspect of AT culture that I enjoyed, and it's actually long distance hiking culture, is trail names. Trail names are just nicknames that are given to hikers. You can give yourself a trail name, but most of the time it's given by somebody else that you meet on trail, and it can be given because of something that you say or that you do. Many of y'all are familiar with my Tramily member Perk, who also did the Pacific Crest Trail and Continental Divide Trail the same year that I did. But his name is Perk because he carried a percolator with him on the Appalachian Trail to make coffee. But what's cool is to see people get trail names, and at first you wonder, well, what happened to Kelly? Well, my friend Kelly on the AT became Rigga, and so if you stop seeing a name of a person that you knew by what Perk would call their civilian name, then you wonder, like, well, who did they become? Anyway, not only are fellow hikers very supportive on the trail, but a lot of the trail communities, the towns surrounding the trail, they have a lot of trail enthusiasts who love to go out and help hikers. In fact, of all of the trails that I've hiked, I think the AT really does have the best trail enthusiast community. And we like to call these people who do random acts of kindness for hikers trail angels. And what trail angels provide in random acts of kindness to hikers is known as trail magic. Now, trail magic can take several forms. It might be a trail angel offering a hiker a ride to and from town. It could also be a trail angel leaving a cooler at a road crossing or somewhere along the trail that has beer or Coca-Colas and snacks in it. There are even trail angels who travel from other states to come set up tents where they feed hikers for different weekends out of the year. I even had a lady who offered me and a couple of my Tramily members to stay the night at her house, and she cooked us dinner, washed our clothes, let us dry out our gear. So it was just a very mind-blowing experience to have complete strangers be so kind and giving to me. You know, at first it's like, wait a second, what string is attached to this? But I think people are drawn to those who are willing to go out and chase their dreams. And maybe it's like vicariously living through them, or maybe it's because they admire that so much they actually just want to help people succeed in their goals. And it's incredible. It's something that really can't be explained. You just have to experience it. If you're planning to hike the AT, you should also be aware of one of the big celebrations around the trail that happens every year in the small trail town of Damascus, Virginia. And the event is Trail Days. So if you're familiar with the AT, you've probably heard about this, but it's just a big celebration of the Appalachian Trail and the hikers. It's usually held a week after Mother's Day on that particular weekend in May. And it's just a huge event where hikers of the current year and through hikers from past years or trail enthusiasts all gather up, and folks will camp out in what is known as Tent City. It's just this big field and this area back in the woods where, I mean, hundreds of tents are put up. There are different things that you can enjoy at Trail Days. A lot of vendors come and set up booths. They'll have gear for sale or even gear repair. There are a lot of giveaways that happen. They usually have some kind of music in the park area, but they'll have food trucks. And there are typically speakers that come to Trail Days. They've had all sorts of trail legends and people who have held FKTs, fastest known times. One of my favorite parts of Trail Days is the hiker parade. And all of the hikers line up with the current year starting the parade, and then it goes back from there. And you'll see people holding up a pole of some kind with the year on it, and all of the people from that year gather up. But in this parade, there's this tradition where all of the people of the town of Damascus, or people who come to spectate and aren't through hikers, they'll watch everybody come through, but because hikers are known for being so stinky and needing a shower, they like to hose off the hikers as they walk by. And it could be with water guns that they're shooting the hikers with, or actual hose pipes that they're spraying, but it's just a lot of fun. And for the people of the current year through hiking, a lot of hikers try to walk into Damascus at the time of Trail Days. That's usually a pretty good pace. If you start, you know, end of March, beginning of April, you can hit Damascus at a pretty good time. But even if you're ahead on trail or behind Damascus on trail, trail angels often shuttle hikers, or you can hitchhike into there. But usually most hikers try to make it there one way or another. And it's often a big reunion for even the current year hikers who haven't seen people that they first met on trail, you know, several weeks back. And then there's usually a huge bonfire each night for folks to just hang out and talk. And there's a lot of dancing that goes on around the fire. They just kind of go around in a circle. So don't miss out on that. If you're somebody who's like, I don't dance, like, you cannot miss out if you are through hiking that year on going around the fire. Just trust me and at least make one lap around, because I promise, for most people at least, you've never felt that free in your entire life. So to get out there and just act like a fool around the fire, it's very freeing. And now for etiquette, aka how not to be a jerk. Etiquette is one of those words that you probably don't think of when you're considering being a wild animal out on the trail, or at least trying to rewild yourself to some extent. But each of us isn't the only individual out on the trail trying to enjoy nature, so it's obviously nice when we can be considerate of one another. And while some of this stuff might be common sense, when you're tired or you've had a tough day, it's easy for things to slip our minds. So I'm not trying to be preachy, but I do want to go over etiquette for different scenarios. Shelter etiquette. Obviously, we want to be thoughtful of the people that we are sharing a tight space with. Sometimes you might be the only person in a shelter, other times it can be a full house. So when you first get to the shelter and you start setting up, keep in mind that other people may be coming along, so it's good to not have all of your stuff spread out all over the shelter, taking up a lot of space. Also, consider your hygiene when you're in a shelter. Obviously, everybody's gonna stink and that's just part of it. But sitting next to a person in a really tight space that's cutting their toenails and they're clipping off and bouncing everywhere, that's really disgusting. If I get somebody's broken off toenail on me, I'm gonna be upset. Hikers are generally kind of gross, but you don't have to go the extra mile. Next, eating in shelters and cooking is generally frowned upon because you're not supposed to do things that attract wild animals to the space that you're going to be sleeping. If you're a smoker, the most polite thing that you can do is step outside of the shelter before you smoke, and make sure that wherever you're smoking at, the wind is not blowing into the shelter and dragging your smoke over there anyway. The way we use technology in shelters should be considered. For example, if you want to watch a movie or a video on your phone while you're lying in your sleeping bag in the shelter, that's perfectly fine, but you should do so with earbuds on and at a reasonable volume so you're not disrupting other people who are trying to relax or sleep. Also, if you're having a phone conversation, you should step away from the shelter so that not everybody has to be a part of whatever is going on with you and your phone. Snoring. If you are a person who snores and you're aware of that and you know that you're going to keep other hikers up at night if you sleep in the shelter, then it's really not fair of you to do so. So make sure you've got a tent or a hammock, and if it's possible for you to use that shelter system and set up separately instead of sleeping in the three-sided structure shelters, then I think that's the kindest thing that you can do. For those of you who will be sleeping in shelters, I recommend bringing some earplugs just in case, because unfortunately not everybody who snores is considerate that they might keep people up. In the shelters and shelter areas, be mindful of hiker midnight. I tend to be a night owl, so if there was a fire ring with a fire going, then I was over there by that fire enjoying conversation and hanging out with people. And hiker midnight is roughly 9 p.m. That's when a lot of people are in the bed trying to sleep. So anything after that time, try to keep it down and disruptions to a minimum. Now for you early risers, remember if the night owls were quiet for you the night before when you're packing up the next morning, because not everybody is going to be on the same schedule out there. So if you're up before the sun, make sure you're packing up quietly as possible, not stomping around and throwing your gear down and all of that when you're getting ready to go, because that's just also not fair. I know some people think the early bird gets the worm, but for the rest of us, we feel like the second mouse gets the cheese. Now I want to talk about shelter etiquette, specifically in the Smoky Mountain National Park. And not so much etiquette as I just want to say, be sweet to one another, y'all, because Smoky Mountain National Park is where I first saw any kind of friction between section hikers and through hikers, and there's really no reason for it. It's not the section hikers' fault or the through hikers' fault, it's the way the system is set up. And I don't know that I have the perfect answer, but the situation is, as a through hiker, you will fill out a permit saying that you're going to enter the Smoky Mountain National Park. You'll be there for approximately X amount of days, and they might have you approximate where you might camp. But you're free to camp at any of the shelters throughout that stretch of trail. Now, you can sleep in a shelter if there is space, but you must either sleep in the shelter or camp near the shelter. As a section hiker going through Smoky Mountain National Park on the AT, you are required ahead of time, in advance, to reserve what shelter you're going to sleep in and list your exact itinerary. And as a section hiker, you are only permitted to sleep in the shelters on the AT where you make your reservation. You're not allowed to stay in a personal shelter near the three-sided structure. Now, when you're planning this out ahead of time and you're all excited about your vacation, you're not worried about how many through hikers are going to be coming through at that time. This is the time you can get off to go section hike the Smoky Mountain National Park on the AT, and that's exciting. So there can be an issue for through hikers because, for example, if I'm the last one to get to a shelter in the Smoky Mountain National Park and it's cold, it's been raining all day, and I'm all set up, I've got my dry and warm sleeping bag on me, I've got my wet clothes off. Some of these shelters even have a tarp to cover the front to help keep the heat in, and some of them also have fireplaces in the shelters, so they can be really cozy. Next thing I know, here comes a section hiker who is soggy and looking for some shelter space. Well, if I'm the last through hiker in the shelter, this section hiker has reserved a place in the shelter for the night, and they can only sleep in the shelters along the AT. They're not allowed to camp in a tent or a hammock. So I have to get up and pack all of my stuff up and move out to the rain and the cold and set up my personal shelter. So that sucks. It sucks for the through hikers. It sucks for the section hiker that has to say, hey, you know, I have no choice but to get in here for the night, so somebody's gonna have to go. So just be considerate as a through hiker. Don't take it personally that you have to leave the shelter. If you do, it's just the way that things are. And keep in mind that any given time, shelters can be closed for people to sleep in, so make sure you respect those closures. Now for trail magic etiquette. I know it seems like, what could somebody do at trail magic that would be rude? But unfortunately, I have seen it happen, so I just want to touch on this. When you're at trail magic, be mindful of the situation and how much the trail angel that is giving trail magic has. So if they have several tents set up with all the food that you can eat, then sure, go to town and be appreciative and fill your belly. But if you see that this is kind of a quick pop-up stand and this person has one pack of hot dogs and you know that there are other hikers coming behind you, then don't sit there and eat 4 hot dogs. You know, as excited as you are to get a hot dog, the hiker coming right behind you will be too. So make sure in those situations you are considerate of your fellow hiker and only take in a reasonable share. And obviously, as a through hiker, you should show gratitude towards the person that is offering you trail magic. I've never seen hiker be ungrateful for something that they were given, so this is kind of a no-brainer. But there are little things that I think as through hikers you might not realize are very special to a trail angel. For example, they may have a little journal that they want you to sign so that they can log all of the through hikers they were able to meet that year. And to you it might be like, I don't feel like signing that, because you know, you sign the shelter log books, and sometimes there will be registers at trailheads or different things like that. So I know sometimes it can seem monotonous, but to this person who came out there to do this act of kindness for you, it's a really big deal potentially. With trail magic, most of the time the trail angels know that hikers don't want to carry the trash that they used with them when this person obviously has a vehicle or access to town. So they usually will have some sort of garbage area that you can put your stuff. But if you come up to a cooler and there are just cans there, if it doesn't have a bag that says leave your trash or something like that, then if you drink one of those cans, that trash is yours and you should take it with you. And unfortunately, another thing that I've seen is people taking their personal trash bags and dumping them in coolers so that whoever comes and get the cooler now has to deal with this garbage, or other through hikers now have to sift through garbage to get out a canned drink. So that's really not cool, and you have to know that that's not okay. But don't just assume that trail angels want to deal with your trash. If they're there and present and they offer, that's great. But if not, assume this is your trash that you now have to deal with. Etiquette obviously isn't just a trail thing. It should also fall over into town stops. There are a lot of trail angels along the way that you might not see specifically on the trail, but they will be in towns willing to help you out, giving you a free place to stay, shuttling you around to do your errands. But just like in normal life, there aren't always good people in the world, the same is true of the trail and the people you might find out there. I would say by far the majority are good people, but there are bad ones who will try to take advantage of situations, who will feel entitled to certain services. There was a place called the Palmerton Jail in Pennsylvania, and before I could get there during my thru hike, there was a group of hikers who partied like rock stars and got it shut down. Also during the year I thru hiked, there was a guy in Dalton, Massachusetts that was allowing people to camp in his yard, and you could get water out of his spigots and charge your electronics, and it was all for free. But he had some simple rules like keep your voices down because I have neighbors, don't go onto my neighbor's property. And some hikers who just refused to follow some simple rules got that place shut down for the rest of the year and possibly thereafter because they were being rude. But hopefully none of y'all watching this video will be like that, so things don't continue to get shut down for hikers who are really excited about being there and experiencing those offerings. And there are some additional things with towns in general. First, if you're staying somewhere like a hostel where you know there are going to be a lot of hikers staying there and maybe a small amount of bathrooms, make sure you're reasonable with your shower time. That way other people get warm water and they don't have to wait hours at a time to finally get a shower. Toilet paper. You'll actually see signs around that say, please don't rob our toilet paper from different businesses that hikers might go to or hostels, because a lot of times folks will just ball up what toilet paper they need off of a roll of toilet paper and put it in their pack and hit the trail. But a lot of these places will have toilet paper for sale by the individual roll, or you and your Tramily can split up a 4-pack or something like that. And obviously if you're in a bunk room, observing the things that I was mentioning about sleeping in shelters earlier, like if you are a snorer, then maybe ask if all the snorers can kind of be bunked together, or if they have private rooms, that might be something that you can look into. But also realizing that some people might want to hit the hay around hiker midnight and not stay up all night. I've heard concern over the years, specifically with the Appalachian Trail, and people thinking that if they go out to thru hike it, they're going to be dragged into a 2,000 plus mile party. Now, if you're into that sort of thing, then it can be a 2,000 plus mile party. But if you're not, then it certainly doesn't have to be. Just like in your hometown right now, there are people who use and abuse things like alcohol, tobacco, and recreational drugs. So the same is true of the Appalachian Trail. Pretty much anything that you could get in town with humans, you can also get out on the trail. But is it easy to avoid if that's not your cup of tea? Absolutely. Most of the time you're not going to have somebody that's sitting in the middle of a shelter with a cigarette or a joint blowing smoke right in your face. And if they are, then just like you would in any other situation in normal life, you can say, hey, do you mind stepping out of the shelter? I really don't want to be a part of your cigarette or your joint. And most people will be like, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, I didn't even realize what I was doing. Absolutely, I'll step aside. When I was thru hiking the AT, I met a family of 2 parents and 5 children who ranged from 10 into their early 20s. And the parents said, yeah, our kids saw people doing things from time to time that they wouldn't have at home, but the same is true of pretty much anywhere that you'll go in the world. And there were only a couple of times that they recalled anyone being so blatant or any kind of rude about it. So use those communication skills, and if something is bothering you, just let somebody know politely, and I'm sure they'll be willing to switch that up for you. Now, if you're planning to quit something like drinking, smoking, drugging while you are on your thru hike of the AT, then I definitely commend you for that. But I just don't want you going out there thinking that those substances that are available at home won't be out on the trail, because chances are they will be. And if you're trying to quit smoking cigarettes and you think, well, I'm going to be in the woods more days than not, so I won't have access to it, you're going to see somebody smoking a cigarette and you will likely be tempted to bum one from them. Also, with town stops happening anywhere from 3 to 7 days, you're gonna have access to those things pretty regularly. So all I'm saying is it's not a foolproof plan. Know that before you go and prepare for that. All right, y'all, well, hopefully this has given you an idea of what to expect from the Appalachian Trail in the way of culture, community, and also how not to be a jerk to your fellow hiker. Thank y'all so much for watching. If you found this video useful, don't forget to subscribe before you go, and we will see y'all next time.